The EOS M50 is a compact mirrorless camera that was released by Canon in the year 2018, and it was also the first camera that I ever bought for myself. And today we're going to be going over the pros and cons of this particular model. This is the Mark I, and we're also going to be going over why I think that this is still a great camera for beginners in the year 2021. So you guys ready? Let's get to it. So if you're well versed in what mirrorless versus DSLR means, you should skip ahead to this time right here. For everybody else, what a mirrorless camera is there's no mirror in this body that flips up when you take a photo. Back in the day, when you would take a photo on a camera, the mirror which was in there to reflect the image up into your eyepiece actually flipped up, exposed the sensor or the film, and then flipped back down. And that's why when you hit the shutter button on an older camera, the viewfinder goes black for a moment. If you look in here, the reason I have the lens off right now is so that you can see that the sensor is right there inside. It goes right behind the lens, and when you take a photo or you're taking a video, you see exactly what the sensor sees in your EVF or on the screen on the back. I'm not here to get into DSLR versus mirrorless. I'm not really interested in that argument. Basically, in my opinion, I think the whole industry is moving towards mirrorless, and it's the more modern design. There's less moving parts in it, so there's less to break, but there are still DSLRs out there that are amazing. If you're here looking at different cameras and you're thinking about buying your first camera right now, you need to do the research and figure out what suits you best. You can't take some guy on YouTube's word for it that mirrorless or DSLR is better than the other. So as I said, the M50 was the first camera that I ever bought for myself, and I'm so glad that I did. If you're a beginner starting out and you're looking at camera bodies and there's a bunch of different brands and models and all this stuff and it's overwhelming you, the M50 is a great place to start as a beginner photographer or filmmaker or both, because it is super simple to use. The menu system is so easy and intuitive. Everything's well labeled. By comparison, the A7 III that I own, it took me like 3 days to figure out the menu system and what everything did. See, recording off. Why would I want it on? I don't even know what that means. Audio out, timing live. My options are live or lip sync. What does that mean? What other timing is there for audio besides live? Oh, I figured out the issue, guys. The SWIT VH autofocus area is off. Maybe a few less abbreviations would help me. This thing, a toddler could pick up and start getting good photo and good video from it the first day that they had it. As I said, this is an APS-C sensor. It's not a full frame. So basically, pro cameras have full frame sensors in them. They're a bit bigger. They do better in low light, pull a little more detail out of things, but that's not to say that it's a bad sensor in this camera. It's just not a full frame sensor. Going around the body on the outside, you have a microphone input on the left, you have your SD card and your battery on the bottom there. You also have the 1/4 inch input on the bottom for your tripod, right? Pshaw. On the grip here, you have an HDMI input and, well, a mini HDMI and a micro USB input on the side. That's for monitors or charging or whatever you decide to use them for. Obviously, you have your shutter button, your dedicated video button. You have your fully articulated screen on the back. You have your electronic viewfinder. You have a little flash on the top that's gonna make your photos look like complete shit. And that's pretty much it for the outside. You have your lens release on the front, and that's all of it. I mean, there's like some function buttons and some other stuff, but you'll figure that out as you use this if you buy it. Most cameras, I mean, there's not gonna be some magic button on here that makes it do something amazing. All cameras pretty much do the same thing. It's just set up a little bit differently on each body. So don't worry about button layout that much. One thing I do like about the M50 as far as ergonomics are concerned though, is there's one wheel on the top by the shutter button, and that can control pretty much everything on the back here. It's pretty nice to not have different wheels for all different stuff, so you're not like doing this while you're trying to, that's what I do on my A7 III. There's like 3 knobs on there and I gotta like start moving stuff around while I'm trying to adjust stuff. This, you just have one knob and you're good to go. Another thing that I actually don't like about this camera is the grip on here is tiny. So unless you have like absolutely tiny hands, like you're a very small female or a kid, you're not gonna like the grip on here. So the Canon M50 is 24.1 megapixels. It shoots in 4K, but if you decide to shoot in 4K with this body, you lose your dual pixel autofocus. It'll actually switch over to a contrast-based focus, which isn't as reliable in my opinion. and in 1080p you get the dual pixel autofocus back. Most of the time I shoot in 1080p on this thing. It does 60 frames per second, 24 frames per second, or 30 frames per second. Most of the time I'm jumping between 24 and 60 frames per second, but it does do slow-mo. That's super nice. Another thing that it does, which my A7 III doesn't, is it takes time-lapse videos in body. As opposed to another camera where you would use an intervalometer and take like 800 pictures and then make them into a time-lapse, this just takes a video and condenses it down. Now, it doesn't look as nice and it doesn't give you as much control, but it's nice to have the feature there if you just want to take a quick time lapse while you're busy doing something else. The kit lens on this camera is awesome. It's stabilized, the autofocus is great on it, it's little, you can use it for like basically anything. It's not the fastest lens in the world. At its minimum aperture is 3.5, but it's still a great lens and it comes with the camera, so you can't really complain about that as somebody who's just starting out. So as I said in the beginning, this camera is great for beginners in 2021. At the price point, if you can find one of these used for 350, 400 bucks, you're not gonna find much else in that price range that does as much as this camera does. I like Canon for beginners because it's just so easy to use. Like, it's idiot proof, which is great for me, as I said. One of the drawbacks of this camera is that the battery life is just awful. Like, it doesn't last at all. You're gonna need 5 batteries. Right now, I think I have like 8 batteries for this camera, just because if you take this on a shoot, you're gonna go through all of them because they just don't last that long. Now, granted, they're tiny, they're cheap, they don't weigh anything, so like it's easy to have a lot of batteries for it, but sometimes I just wanna have a couple batteries with me, not 8 batteries. So, I mean, something to consider. Another thing to consider, the flash on this camera sucks. Don't use it. You shouldn't point a little tiny light at something and try to use that as a flash. It has never helped me take a better photo ever. Even in low light situations, I'd rather just not take the photo than use the flash on this camera. This is advertised as a 4K camera, and I think that's a bit disingenuous on Canon's part because it's not really a 4K camera. You can shoot in 4K, but you lose like pretty much all the features, and you can only do 24 frames per second. So no slow-mo, no super nice autofocus. It's just your beat, you just 24 frames per second, go hose it off. If you're a beginner starting out, you don't want to be going through a menu system for 5 hours before you feel comfortable with shooting on your camera. And you also don't want to be in auto mode so that everything's being done for you. You want something that you can put in manual mode and understand what's going on. And that's why I like Canon for beginner photographers or filmmakers, because their menu systems are intuitive, they're easy to understand, everything's labeled well, and you know exactly what you're getting into when you're using the menu system on this. Another great thing about Canon for beginners is there's not a whole hell of a lot going on the outside of this camera. When I picked up the A7 III for the first time, or the A7S III, there's like a million knobs on it. I have no idea what any of the buttons do. They're like all programmable, and I don't know what they're programmed to. By comparison, this has like 5 buttons on it and you know what all of them do because they're all labeled. And plus, it has a full touchscreen on the back, so you can use the touchscreen to just figure out whatever you're doing. So again, great camera for beginners, and I hope you enjoyed this video. I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye!